And what I realized at the end of it was everyone's the same. Well, no, not everyone's not the same, but what they want is the same. They just want to be accepted, and they just want to be seen, be acknowledged. And I was like, wow. And photography really allowed me to see that, because in a lot of spaces I wasn't the central person. The story wasn't about me.
We've been trying to record this episode for such a long time, and there have been technical issues, and then there's been illness, and then there's just been so much going on. So I'm excited about this, because you know how things like this, it just means something good is really going to come out of this. So I'm excited. I'm really excited about this episode. And before we get into anything, we need to introduce our guest, because that's only polite. Our guest today is Katrina James, and we're really excited to have her here today with us. She's a counsellor who helps people unlock the emotional barriers that stop them from moving forward in their careers and their lives. She specializes in working with migrants who understands the complexities and difficulties involved in migrating to a new country. She helps her clients identify stories that they tell themselves that keep them stuck, so that they can replace them with stories that empower them to live fully and happily. Welcome to the show, Katrina.
Yay, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. You're right. It's taken a little while, but, all good things take time. So here we are. Yay.
I'm excited.
We made it.
Yeah.
We did. And thank you so much for joining us, Katrina. It's good of you to give your time. So we really appreciate it.
Welcome.
So our first question is, as Em mentioned, you're a counsellor.
Mm-hmm.
For me and anyone else who's not really sure what the difference is, what is the difference between a counsellor and a coach in the work that you do?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Sandra. So I'm glad that you've started with it. They're actually they're super close together, counselling and coaching. And I just want to say as well that what I'm going to say is my take on it. So there isn't actually a proper answer to this. It's super vague, and I have researched it a lot. For me, though, the difference is, so counselling is looking at kind of the past, what are the patterns that have got you to where you are, and then coaching kind of takes that baton from that place to then go forward. Okay, you've got a goal. What do you need to do to achieve that? And actually, often they work really well together, counselling and coaching, because coaching doesn't really go into the deep emotional parts. And so it might just be, if things are coming up repeatedly and the same thing keeps happening, that's a pretty good indication that maybe you need to go just chat to a counsellor so that you can dig that part out to keep going on. So super similar. Another way to look at it is that this great analogy that I saw is about gardening. And so a counsellor is like the architect who, looks at all of the things at the soil and what needs to be fixed in the soil before you can even put the plants in. And then the coach is like the gardener who comes along and trims everything or maybe moves things a little bit. So you can see they're actually super linked together, and they can go back and forth as well. Sometimes you need to clear out the soil. Sometimes you need to, just trim the plant a little bit and get some information from someone who can help you go further.
That's a brilliant analogy and a brilliant description, actually. And I'm already thinking about people that I know who perhaps are trying to do the coaching side of their journey, but honestly, they're not yet. They haven't unpacked all that other stuff that's going to help them springboard to the next session. And I suspect that a lot of coaches can see that. I love the way that you can say, well, maybe it's not time for coaching yet. It's time to take care of the inner self and perhaps do some reflection before you can move forward, because otherwise repetition is going to continue and the same mistakes and the same issues arise. Yeah, thank you for that.
And I see that a lot. People will come to me and they're like, just give me the strategy. What do I need to do? I'll do, just give me A, B, C, and D, and I will do those things. And I'm kind of like, Ah, I'm not sure that that's the thing. You've tried this before. Maybe we just need to look at something a little, and the emotional stuff can be really hard for some people to look at. And I love emotions, so that's why I do the counselling side of things.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm just thinking about someone I'm going to start sending to a counsellor in my own life. Not me. I've been there, done that, but definitely a few other people I know.
I have a question though.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. Sorry to jump in, Sandra.
That's okay.
On the counseling side, do you find there's a stigma with the word? So when I hear counselor, I associate it with grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Do you know
definitely. I
why?
think lots of people associate counsellor like with there's something wrong with me. So or people will say all the time, "Oh, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that bad that I need to get counselling for this. Like, I think it's not that big of a deal." And it's that's one part of counselling can help with trauma, like you said, and grief. That is one part of counseling, but it is so much more than that. And for me, clients, I don't start with traumas with clients, like, tell me about your biggest, darkest secrets. No, and that's not my role. My role is to listen to people and what they want to come with. And then sometimes, of course, I will dig a little bit deeper, but if it's too sensitive, we don't touch that stuff. But yes, definitely the stigma is there because it is just associated with this single thing. And anything that is associated with a single story is never true, right? Because so many things have a lot big dimension to it. And so when you think counseling and you link it to something's wrong with me, or just grief, or something has to be fixed, when you're in that mindset of I need to be fixed, you're also in a mindset of I'm damaged, what's wrong with me? And from that mindset, being able to just be curious, which is really what I do with clients, is get curious. It's very hard to do that when you're thinking that this is just like something I've got to get through, or I've just got to get better. It's not a broken leg, and it's so, counseling is so wide, and that is why I love it. And a part of my job, is educating people about how wide counseling is and how useful it is. And I work in a space where it really hasn't, people haven't talked about counseling like this before, like within just work or, migration. People are like, oh, but I'm fine. I'm not, or I'm not that bad, but that's not the point. It's not the point.
Very true. I do too, yeah. So that actually, you just touched on where we were going to go next, which is so broad, and you've decided to narrow your focus to migrants. So what made you sort of choose that particular path for your career and your counselling?
I love this question. I've been asked it a lot, and probably as a counsellor, we're not very good at giving like direct answers. But this is what I'll say: is I have just always recognized this, that migrants need some support. There's no support. And I'm talking about skilled migrants here, right? So you get your visa, it's like, okay, thanks very much, like like you can come now. There's not even like help to get a job, there's nothing. And it's like, of course you need support. And a lot of people are coming from countries that are really different. Australia is a pretty individualistic culture. And so, to come from somewhere where it's more communal and then shift into this individual thing, it's like, of course that's hard, and of course that can be helped. And for me, I've just always seen through my friends and through other people that I know, I see this, I guess it's an underutilization of skills, or these stories that have been attached that, things like, oh, you probably won't work in the job you want to do, or you'll have to take you have to go a few grades down, or there's so many stories that exist, right? And I just can see how damaging they are. And that for me is where I just, after I studied counseling and was encouraged to go into a niche, I never wanted to do relationship counseling. I wasn't interested in like women, which I think is fantastic, all of that, but it just wasn't for me. But I could just see my migration. I need to be working with migrants. They are the people who need the most help, and that's where I'm going to go right now. And that is it. There hasn't been like a big moment or an experience. It's just I've always seen it.
That's excellent. And following your passion, and that's when you're going to do the most good, isn't it? So fantastic.
And I love that you actually saw, like, you identified the problem. You identified the problem. And what we see a lot in the media is people saying a lot about, if they're coming to this country, they should be grateful. If they're coming to this country, like, there are a lot of empathy towards people that are leaving everything they're familiar with and moving to this country, and particularly skilled migrants. And I love that you mentioned that it's not the same, because when you move here, there's certain expectations. When we moved here, my expectation was we've been invited into this country and we are termed skilled migrants, so we're going to arrive and get really nice jobs. No, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. And it's, sometimes I think it took me a while to be comfortable in working in this space, because I was kind of like, oh, am I talking against Australian? Like, people are like, oh, why would you support them? Like, that's not the Aussie way or whatever. Yeah. But I'm like, I just see it. Like, recently I read the new migration strategy. And I was just like, this is, okay, you call it a migration strategy. I call it a population strategy. And literally, like, without migrants, Australia's like, there's zero growth. And the document actually says this, that there's not going to be growth. And for me, I'm like, so why do we not treat people like that? Like, there's some way of, I don't know how to say it, but like, it sounds like you've had this experience too, where Australia is kind of like, oh, we've invited you, you're so lucky to be here, like, and then don't do anything.
Such yourself like, out.
But you paid to, it wasn't a free process either.
No.
And you didn't just pay financially, but you pay like with emotionally and so many other things. When it's like, thanks so much for coming, because we literally cannot survive without you.
We value you. And it's...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that you're a precious resource that the country needs.
Exactly.
And,
exactly. Yeah.
And it's the education. I think there's a lot that needs to be done between the reality on the ground and what the media reports and the problems that people face. So when we talk about housing crisis, for example, and the cop-out, and I say it's a cop-out because I think it's like the easiest thing to do, is to say, oh, it's because we've got high levels of migration. That's why we have a housing crisis. But I always believe that with a problem, there are a lot of issues that cause a problem, and it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that progressively happens. But the easiest thing to do is to say, oh, look at the numbers. It's migration. That's why there's a housing crisis. Exactly. But that narrative then, what it creates towards people that are easily identifiable as migrants, and I say easily identifiable because if Sandra and I are walking, people naturally assume I'm the migrant, right?
Yeah.
So it then creates that society that we don't want in Australia.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway,
and then in this case, you or the person who's migrated, then they hear this message and they're like, maybe I am the problem. Maybe, and this is the part that I see that causes the damage, is that internalization of this. And so you're not necessarily communicating that to anyone, because you don't want to tell people at home, because they're like, but you're in Australia, what are you complaining about? So there's not really anyone to talk about it to, and talking about it to other Aussies mostly lands on deaf ears, where they're like, well, but we let you in, like, what are you complaining about? And but that internalization can be so damaging, because then if you believe you're the problem, you start acting like the problem, right? And everyone loses then. We as in Australia, doesn't get the full benefit of your knowledge and skills and ability and just the joy of being a person, and then you lose out on your own self. You lose your connection to self, and like, everyone's losing here. And I don't know how more people can't see it, to be honest. I'm like, this is like, seems pretty simple to me. but then we did steal other people's land. But I guess, look, we're not on, it's not what the podcast is about. So I'm still there.
I got goosebumps as you were talking. And, you talk a lot about the stories you create, the stories you tell to create your world. And if you want to change the world, you need to change your story. What impact, like you've touched a bit, but can you just tell us a little bit more about the impact that stories have in our lives?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. Like everything is a story. Literally everything is a story, just from things that we're seeing or hearing, and all day we're getting a story. Even just that artwork that I'm looking at behind you has a story. The plants that I'm seeing, everything has a story. And so it's impacting us all of the time. And when I talk about stories helping us, it's like, what is the story that helps you move forward? Does the story that you're never going to get a job in what you want to do, does that help you move forward? Or does the story of I'm going to be able to figure this out, just what helps you? And I don't know, maybe you find it more helpful to be told that you're not going to get what you want. I haven't seen it work, but you just don't know. It's like the fuel you put in your car. Do you want to put in the cheap stuff, or you want to put in the more expensive stuff and maybe go a bit further?
Oof. I love that. And you've spoken a lot about how you help people. You've got the superpower of helping people to reframe the stories that they tell themselves. And I have seen this in action when we talk about mental wellness and taking a break and breathing. It is what it is, right? Can you walk us through your journey that got you to this point?
Whew. Well, we don't probably have time for all of it, but so very interestingly, actually my first career, I worked as a photographer for a decade. Yeah. And
wow.
Yeah. And now I work as a counsellor, which seems like completely different. But actually, as I've, started my own practice, I realized how much photography has informed my practice. And what it allowed me to do was not only travel the world, but just to see and hear all of these stories and be privileged to go into different spaces. I lived in Berlin for a while, and somehow I got this job at the Australian Embassy. And so I'd be like hanging out with politicians and taking photos of that, and then, going to the club at the night and having the best time of my life and hearing different stories. And what I realized at the end of it was everyone's the same. Well, no, not everyone's not the same, but what they want is the same. They just want to be accepted, and they just want to be seen, be acknowledged. And I was like, wow. And photography really allowed me to see that, because in a lot of spaces I wasn't the central person. The story wasn't about me. I was purely observing. And at the time I didn't realize, how it would affect me or how helpful it would be. But now I see how much it's really, really helped me. And I always knew when I was doing photography that it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. Like, I just never felt completely fulfilled, because it's very transactional. You take some photos, they're like, okay, thanks, and then you go back again. So it's not that full circle. And I love full circle moments. I love just being able to be part of a whole circle moment for someone, so seeing like the change and people being able to tell me what's happened, and then we can move on from there. And, COVID shut down my photography career overnight because there's nothing left to photograph. There's some knowing size there. And I decided to study counselling while I had all of this time. And it just turned into a natural progression, actually. I didn't really think about it. I was just like, okay, I guess I'm doing counselling now. And it's the best. I just love it. And I think what I've just always been guided by is like myself, but then also world things, like what could I do about COVID? There was nothing to photograph. Not my fault. It wasn't my fault. I just had to go with all of the extra time that I had and use some of it. And to be honest, I didn't even know where the counselling was going, but I just thought, let me try this. Let me do it. And I loved it.
That's a great story. That's amazing. Yeah. So, and you can see just when you're speaking about it, the passion that comes through. So, and often they say if you do what you're passionate about, the money will follow, but also you'll be good at it, So
I think
it's great that you've done that.
I just love people. That's probably actually the thing I didn't mention is I just love people, and that's what I loved about photography. I got to see so many different people, and it was amazing. And I remember one night I was doing like an event, and the guy was like driving me around in a Porsche. And then I had to get home, and I caught the bus home, and I was just like, oh my God, like, what is my life? But I was just like, hey, to the bus driver, and I was like, this is so cool. I was just in a Porsche 3 minutes ago, and now I'm on the bus. Like, that is so cool. And the bus driver probably has just as cool stories as the Porsche driver, like that's what I love is just like people, they're so awesome. And that's been the thread. That is definitely the thread.
Absolutely. And you were mentioning before about us all being the same but not the same. And that's our humanity, isn't it? Human beings strive. We want the best for our families, for the people around us, and then we want to be connected to other people. And you're seeing it, and you're doing it, and you're enabling it, which is fantastic. So, through the work that you're doing, how do you envisage your role in fostering a just and equitable society? It's a biggie, another one.
It's a really biggie. For me, I feel like at the moment I'm looking more towards love client work, but also I'm like, okay, this isn't enough. Like the problem is like this big, and then one-on-one sessions is like I can't make the dot small enough for like the impact. It's a massive impact on that person's life, but I can see that it does need to be bigger in structures. And so that's why I do things like reading government documents and advocating as well. I've been in contact with different members of parliament and trying to really shift that focus. And it's not going to take one or two emails, but it's going to take a lot. And I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but someone's got to start, right? Someone's got to stand up and say, hey, this isn't, and it doesn't, it shouldn't be the people who, like, it shouldn't be migrants who are standing up and saying, hey, this is not great. It should be people like white Australians who see injustice and go, hang on a second, I don't reckon that this is fair. Like, you've got enough to deal with. Let me, advocate for you. Let me be the one who goes and does this. And it's not always easy, because it's definitely easier just to sit down and shut up and not really rock the boat. I'm going to die one day, and I just want to have done everything I can to I'm like, if I really care about people, how do I show that? How do I show that? And so I've got to show that for me personally by challenging systems and by standing up. And sometimes it's a comment on LinkedIn to somebody, or sometimes it's a personal thing. I'm a part of a business group, and it's that has no diversity other than different businesses, but other than that there's not much. And it took me a little bit because I was like, oh, I don't know if I should say something, but we're just getting the same speakers all the time and it's not really that interesting. And so I said this to the woman who runs it. I kind of sent her some names that I thought people that she should get on to talk to us, and she was like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. Like, I just didn't even think about this. And so to me, that's also activism is just saying what needs to be said. And sometimes it's just a tiny thing, commenting, saying someone's name who's not in the room. It's Absolutely. So important.
And also people do want to help, but they don't know where to start. So putting some resources their way as well, not assuming that they don't want to help.
Exactly. And genuinely being like, I know that this is not, like, it wasn't planned, whatever. I'm not going to go into all the name and blames. It's like, here's the information. You want to pick it up or not? If you don't want to pick it up, it's probably not the space I want to be in. But here it is. I've said my thing. It's up to, can lead a horse to water, and then they make the decision from there.
Oh my God, I've loved every minute of this conversation. And it reminded me what you said, Katrina, about allyship and advocating. That is so important because all of us move in different circles. And
Yeah,
there are some people, believe it or not, that have never had a non-white friend or colleague or neighbor or anything.
yeah,
So the way
yeah,
they view their world is very closed in. And unless so the assumption shouldn't be there's a deliberate exclusion. The assumption should be, okay, how can we help? I mean, I believe
yeah,
there are so many resources out there, but we can't assume people have the time.
yeah.
And one of the things there's an interview I listened to a while ago. I think it was Ellen Pompeo, or I probably butchered her
Mm.
name, but she acts in Grey's Anatomy.
Yes, yes, yes. I
Yes.
know.
And she was talking about, she's a white woman, and she was saying that each time she starts a project, she always looks at who is involved in the project. Is there enough representation? Are there enough women? Are there
Yeah,
enough people of color? Is there representation across the board? And if there isn't, she always writes a list on a piece of paper and gives it to whoever is in charge and says,
yeah.
hey, have you reached out to these people? They could be a
Awesome.
great addition to this. So I absolutely love
Yeah,
that it's advocating and it's allyship.
yeah,
And one of the things I've spoken about this on LinkedIn and in so many places, but passing the
yeah.
mic. It's such a
Totally.
simple but
Yeah,
powerful thing.
yeah,
If
yeah.
someone reaches out to me and wants me to talk about a topic that I know someone else is probably way better and will give much more value, I'm going to pass the mic. And if more
Totally.
of us did
Yeah,
that,
yeah. Yeah,
yep.
totally, right? Like, I'm not going to go and speak about the migrant experience. Like, what? I don't know anything about that, but I can talk about counseling in relation to that, because that's what I know. And then the awesome thing about counseling is it is helping to pass the mic, because I'm not solving problems. I'm not trying to tell you how you should get from A to B. I'm just helping you, like, go like, oh, well, have you noticed mentioned, have you looked at that thing that you spoke about? Because I don't know. And it's just reminding people of their own capacity and ability to solve their own problems. To me, that's awesome, to be able to build someone's capacity. It's a big thing.
Love that.
Mm.
So what keeps you going and who inspires you?
Ooh, oh, who inspires me? I mean, every person who stands up inspires me. Whether it's a mother who's angry over the treatment of their kids, or someone with a disability, and they don't inspire me because they're like, oh my God, you're you can do this even with your disability. No, it's the fact that they stand up, because it's so easy to sit down. It really is, especially in, the world that I was born into. I grew up in Penrith, which is like a really wet. It's Western Sydney, but it's not Western Sydney because it's probably one of the widest suburbs that exists. They had the highest no vote in the referendum last year. I don't think at the highest, but it was pretty damn close. And so my whole life I've been told to, like, shut up, because I grew up in a place that didn't want to hear any of this stuff. Interesting enough, actually, it inspires me now, because I'm like, you know what? I wasn't born there by accident. So maybe it was a testing ground to help me stand up. Like, I've had so many times of people being like, what the hell are you talking about, when I was growing up, that now I'm just like, whatever. I ain't got nothing to lose. Like, like there's nothing to lose. But, people who inspire me are people who come, and they just do what they need to do. I can be inspired by the guy who's collecting trolleys at the Woolworths, or wherever, because they're just doing what they need to do. And that's what gets me through every day, is just going like, you know what, we actually are all part of this. Like, my freedom is linked to your freedom, Am, and it's linked to your freedom, Sandra. Like, it's all together. And so I gotta, I stand up. And sometimes I have a rest. Like, sometimes I sleep in because I'm tired. And that's okay too. I think the hardest thing about being a counsellor sometimes is taking my own advice. Like, what would I talk to my clients about? And sometimes it's about taking a rest. And that part is like, oof,
Mm.
really?
Yep. And that's actually where we came into the conversation, wasn't it? It was about self-care and, how the different things it means to different people, but you still have to do it. So,
yeah,
excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Katrina, what would be your, if someone's listening to this and they're a migrant, they are really at their wits' end about how to move. They've tried looking for a job. They're probably doing something that they're overqualified to be doing, and they're feeling a little bit, the depression is setting in and the homesickness is setting in. What would be the few words you'd say to someone like that?
Oh, I was feeling that. It's like really heavy, what a spot to be in. My first thought, and this is not something I could do, but it's just like, give them a hug. It's okay. You can figure out everything. This is just temporary. Everything changes. And I think when people are in that hard spot, that's not the time to go into deep lessons or to lectures or, give them advice. It's like, that's the time where you've just got to get on your knees and be next to that person and just sit with them. And you know what I think I would say? Like, what do you need? What do you need, like, right now? Is it a glass of water? Is it a hug? Is it for me to go away? That's also fine. What do you need?
That's amazing. There's so much compassion and empathy in that. Another reason that you're excellent at what you do is just understanding that people need things at different times. It's very inspiring. Thank you.
And we need what we need, right?
Sandra.
It's like we need what we need,
Yeah.
Like, if you need help, you need help. No one, if you can't reach the top shelf, you go get a ladder. No one gets annoyed at that. But we get annoyed at needing help to, I don't know, whatever, get a job or something. It's like, well, but you need what you need.
Wow. If people want to work with you or connect with you, where can they find you?
Or you can visit my website, reframecounselling.com.au. But yeah, LinkedIn, I'm there all the time and I love that space. So.
Well, Katrina, thank you. There's been so many gems of wisdom and everything that you've said. I love the empathy that comes through. You don't see a lot of that lately because everyone's dealing with a lot of stuff. It's difficult to be empathetic at this time, but I love it. This has been such an empowering conversation. Thank you for bringing it into our space and having this conversation with Sandra and I. We hope our listeners, you have found this as empowering as we have. And we hope that you've taken a few notes down. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. Connect with Katrina on LinkedIn. You will not regret it. She shares some of the best messages out there. And thank you again to everyone who tunes into Empowered Voices Amplified every week. We are where we are because of you, the listener, and we appreciate your support always. So see you next time, and thanks again for tuning in.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for your work. It's so important. I get so excited to hear the conversations that you're having, and just seeing those voices rise up is like, yes, everyone's allowed to have a conversation.
I love that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, ladies.
Thank you.